Okay, slide shows 6, research in your dissertation. This PowerPoint sets of slides refer to data collection. Now, the first part of data collection is to work out what your sample is going to be. Now, the entire population is everybody you could possibly ask about something. So, for example, if you were in a multi-academy trust and you had 7 or 8 schools and you wanted to find out what teachers in those 7 or 8 schools were willing to participate in or thought about X, Y, or Z, then the entire population is the number of people in the school, in those schools, the total population. Maybe as many as 200-300, maybe more people. Okay. Now, when you're going to go for a purposive sample, you are deliberately going to choose which part of the population you are going to look at. So you might say, for example, I want to look at heads of department, I want to look at people in senior leadership teams, I want to look at people who have responsibility for behaviour management or behaviour enhancement. Okay? So that one is where you deliberately choose the population, and it's perfectly legitimate to do that, providing you have good reason. Okay? A non-purposive sample suggests you're not being selective, you're really going to go and select people out of the entire population. Okay? So the first phrase you come to is purposive or non-purposive. And then your selection, second bullet point, can be equal chance, so something like random. You could randomly pick, you could say every 4th name on the list, doesn't matter. If you're looking for a reasonable size of population or a representative size of population, you need to actually make sure you have sufficient people in your selection to justify that. The selection could be opportunistic, people you happen to have availability of and you want to ask questions about. And the third element of selection can be snowball. This is where you ask, is there anybody else like you? Now, I did this several years back when I was working in Q8, and I wanted to talk to Q8 principals, and Q8 principals don't answer the phone to someone they don't know, but they will talk to you if you are actually introduced by someone else. That's what we call the snowball technique, and you can build up. Now, the concept of generalizability, item 4, is do your findings represent what you could normally find or would expect to find in any similar situation? Okay, so if you are not using an equal chance non-purposive sample, then you're going to modify your generalizability accordingly. It's not going to be representative of the whole population. It's only going to be representative of the part of the population you selected. Now, there's nothing wrong with selecting part of the population, just so long as you tell people why you are doing it and what the rationale are. So the question you're asking yourself is, are you looking for a non-purposive representative inquiry or something else? Now, most of you probably won't be able to do a non-purposive representative inquiry given the time you have. You're going to have all sorts of things about access and opportunity. But if we're going to give value or place value in the data, then the more we define how much our work could be generalizable, the better. Now, there's another word I'll come back to later, which refer to qualitative inquiry. Generalizability is often related to quantitative inquiries, but I'll leave you to dwell on that one for now. So there are 4 basic data collection methods. The use of questionnaires and surveys, and I have to say that these are getting more and more easy to manage given things like Google Forms, given things like Microsoft Forms, where you can quite easily construct a survey and conduct it online. When I did my PhD, I had to print out hundreds of copies of a piece of paper which had 4 pages of questions on it. These days you can knock up a survey instrument quite quickly. Second basic data collection is observations, and a word of warning about that many people don't understand the rigour that's needed with observations. Third sort is documentary analysis. In other words, you're looking at documents that already exist or data that already exists. And the fourth one is interviews. Now, invariably people choose interviews, but we won't force you down that route. There are other more precise methods like ethnomethodology, discourse analysis, narrative inquiry, semiotics, autobiography. There's a whole myriad of them. I'm not sure at this stage you need to be that precise. Okay, so ethnomethodology relates to the idea that we're doing ethnographic studies. In other words, we're looking at what's happening on the ground, understanding people from their own perspective. We're talking about a master's dissertation at this stage. We want a good, solid piece of reliable work. We're not going to be dancing on the head of angels, or angels dancing on the head of a pin. So although there are other more precise methods, I think the basic data collection methods are those four. So questionnaires and surveys. The question that has to be asked all the time is, did your questions have credibility? In other words, have they arisen from the literature or other research? So not things that pop out of your head unless you are establishing and testing a hypothesis. Okay, so make sure that you are looking to say there is a reason, a valid reason for asking this question. I'll come on to validity in a moment. Was only one question asked at a time? Because many people fall into the trap of asking more than one question in the same sentence. So we only want one question. And then, in what ways were the question valid? Now, I refer you to the chapter I've written on collecting quantitative data to give you more guidance on this. But the validity is the content actually relevant? Okay. In other words, is what you're asking people about something they understand and know about? Okay. I'm going to skip construct. I'm going to talk about face validity. Face validity is, do people understand the question in the way in which you meant it? Okay, and there are all sorts of guidance on that about how you can actually make sure that people understand the question as you intended it. Okay, now I'm not going to dwell on the validity anymore. As I say, refer to the chapter which I've made available to you on collecting quantitative data. And the reliability is whether you're going to get the same answers by consistency in test administration. In other words, there's not something that changes as you go on collecting data. That means people are giving different answers or approaching the issue from a different perspective. That moves us on to observations. And observations sound easy, but they're not. Because if you're going to be structured, semi-structured or unstructured, okay, so what happens when people do observations is they don't really know what they're looking for. And what they should be doing is saying, I'm looking for certain types of activities and I'm going to record those and therefore make notes, make annotations as I go that shows how many times I see a particular set of behaviours or a particular issue when observing that situation. Too many people go into an observation situation thinking they're going to just take a guess at what people are going to say, record what they want to. It's going to be much more rigorous than that. So there's many types of observations: naturalistic, participative, laboratory. Participative is a challenging one. Naturalistic means you are looking at what's going on in the circumstance and you're not influencing it at all. Participative means in some way you could be influencing, you could be a participant in that section, like, you know, you're recording what's happening in meetings or you're assessing what's happening in meetings of which you're a member. Okay, and laboratory, as I suggest, is very clinical. So when you're an observer, okay, how did you get yourself in a position where you can catch meaningful moments for instance? So don't think I'm going to go and watch that and then I'll make my conclusions. There's a lot more rigor to it, and I'd advise you to read up on it. Documentary analysis. Documentation exists in a variety of formats. You know, there's letters, meetings, progress reports. You've got archival records, you've got service records of clients, organisational chats, budgets, maps, diaries, and then you've got big stroke open data. Okay, huge amount of data exists in our system now. For example, the number of people who use the university library and the records we keep of their use of the library. And I'm sure you have similar things in your situation. So a legitimate way of collecting data is to look at documents that already exist and do some analysis of them. Okay. Interviews is where most people seem to end up because they want to talk to other people to try and understand their world. Okay, so you've got three basic types: structured, which tends to be a bit like a questionnaire, but somebody's administering it and can actually stand by and say to them what exactly you want as a question. Okay, they are verbal questionnaires. Semi-structured, which is a key issue. Semi-structured has some sort of structure but has some open-ended questions, and what you're trying to do is to understand people's interpretations of their world. Okay, so you might have a general thing you want to investigate, like their perception of an integrated curriculum, and you may discuss with them many ways in which an integrated curriculum could happen. So your questions may not be so precise as they would be in a verbal questionnaire or in a questionnaire. It gives you the chance to interpret what it is you're asking and to feed back to the person's answers there. This is what I hear you saying. Most interviews successfully are semi-structured, where you've got an idea of what it is you're looking for, and you're asking people about that, and you have the right to adjust your questions or to give more clarification on what it is you're looking for, or more clarification on what you think they've said. Group interviews, okay, these are more difficult to manage, particularly if you are recording them, as to try and find out who said what and where. Okay, so with many types of focus groups or group interviews, it's easy to participate but very difficult to analyze afterwards. Obviously the best way would be to have a video link, but you don't necessarily have that. Most of you may be doing audio recordings. Now, I've missed out the unstructured interview, which is where you just go in and have a chat with people to see what you think. But an unstructured interview should become semi-structured as you go forward. Okay, so you'll see more and more people saying similar things, and so you'll ask more and more about those same things. So the semi-structured interviews, okay, when you're undertaking them, did you say all the things you needed to say, we want to record this, I want to make notes, I want to make sure you remain anonymous, okay? But you are asking people to talk as freely and openly as possible. So the simple rules are: listen more than you speak, okay? Ask questions in a way that doesn't threaten them, okay? And avoid using cues. Don't use leading questions, okay? And enjoy what they say to you. Now, one of the challenges you'll find with doing semi-structured interviews is you'll get a lot of information you never ever use again because people want to talk. So you have a task to keep them on task, which is to bring them back to the core issues time and time and time again. Again, have a look at the chapters I've written on this. It starts with analysing qualitative data, but actually covers many of the things about collecting qualitative data as well. So that's the end of this session. Okay, and now we go on to session 7.